I'm Alex, and I never thought I'd be telling this story, but here I am. The past few months have been some of the hardest of my life. The betrayal I've faced has come from the people I trusted the most, my brother and my fiancée. But before we get to that, let me give you a bit of background on my life. I grew up in a small town with my parents, Tom and Linda, and my younger brother, Mike. From the beginning, Mike was the golden child. I mean, it was so obvious it was almost painful. It wasn't just about the little things like who got more praise for doing the dishes or the chores. It was everything. Mike could do no wrong, and I could never seem to do anything right in their eyes. They made excuses for him constantly, and I was always the one held to an impossible standard. For example, when Mike would break something, I'd get the blame. If we both got straight A's, Mike would get a new game console, and I'd get a well done with a reminder to keep working harder. And when I was accepted into college on a partial scholarship, they barely even acknowledged it. But when Mike dropped out after one semester, they threw him a huge celebration and bought him a new car. I worked 2 part-time jobs to get by, while Mike was supported in every misguided decision he made. It wasn't just about the money or the material things. It was the emotional neglect that really started to wear me down. No matter what I did, my parents never seemed to care. As we grew older, Mike's failures were met with support and encouragement. My achievements, however, were minimized or completely ignored. I was left feeling like a shadow in my own family, like I was never enough. But despite everything, I tried to maintain a relationship with Mike. After all, he was my brother, right? And as much as I resented the favoritism, I wanted to be close to him. But it was always one-sided. I'd try to reach out to him, but he'd either ignore me or turn the conversation into a competition. Everything I did, he had to do bigger and better. Then I met Sarah. We hit it off instantly. She was kind, intelligent, and funny. I finally thought I had found someone who appreciated me for who I was. We got engaged after 4 years of dating, and I was happier than I had ever been. For once, I felt like I was on the right track. I had a stable job, a wonderful fiancé, and the future ahead of me seemed bright. But little did I know, everything I had built was about to come crashing down. The engagement party was a disaster. My parents didn't care much about the event, and Mike's reaction was odd. He congratulated us, but there was something off about the way he smiled, almost too insincere, too knowing. I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, Mike had never been particularly invested in anything I did. The next year was a blur of wedding planning and work stress. Sarah and I had busy schedules, but we managed to make time for each other. Or so I thought. Over time, Sarah started acting distant. She was always on her phone, laughing at texts from people I didn't know. She began going out more with her friends, coming home late and smelling of wine and cologne. I trusted her, though. I never even considered that she could be cheating on me. Then one night, Sarah sat me down. She was crying, looking completely devastated. She told me she was pregnant, but it wasn't mine. My world came crashing down around me as I struggled to understand what she was saying. She told me it had been Mike, my own brother. The one I had tried to protect my whole life, the one I had always thought of as family, had been sleeping with my fiancé behind my back. And Sarah had allowed it to happen. I didn't know what to feel in that moment. Betrayal, anger, hurt. It all hit me at once. Sarah tried to explain herself, saying it started when Mike told her I wasn't right for her, that she could do better, and that he could give her everything I couldn't. And it wasn't just one night, it had been going on for months. As she spoke, I felt my heart shatter. The person I loved, the person I trusted most, had betrayed me with the one person I was supposed to trust the most. I kicked Sarah out that night. I couldn't even look at her. I was numb with rage and confusion. She begged for forgiveness, saying it was all a mistake, but it was too late. The damage was done. And the worst part was, I couldn't even go to my family for support. I couldn't turn to them for comfort because they'd always been on Mike's side. They always took his word over mine. This time, I knew there was no going back. The next day I reached out to Mike. I don't even remember what I said to him, everything was a blur. But when I confronted him, he tried to play it off as if it was nothing, just a drunken mistake. But when I pushed, he got defensive. He blamed me, saying that if I had been a better fiancé, Sarah wouldn't have come to him. That's when I snapped. I didn't know what I was planning to do when I went to his apartment, but I was furious. When I got there, my parents were already there. Mike had called them first, telling them his version of events. And you know what? They believed him. They always believe him. My mother lectured me about forgiveness and family, and my father just stood there, arms crossed, looking disappointed in me, not in Mike. I couldn't take it anymore. I finally told them what I thought of their twisted sense of devotion. I told Mike he wasn't my brother anymore and that I was done with them all. I stormed out, leaving them behind, never looking back. That was the beginning of the end. After that day, everything spiraled out of control. I had cut off my family, but I had never anticipated the lengths they would go to in order to try to force their way back into my life. I figured the situation would blow over eventually, that my parents and Mike would have their moment of guilt, and I'd be able to move forward, putting the pieces of my life back together. I couldn't have been more wrong. The weeks following my confrontation were some of the loneliest and most isolating of my life. I moved into a small apartment, one that barely felt like mine, but it was a roof over my head. I tried to focus on work, but my mind was constantly racing. I found myself replaying the events over and over again, how my brother and fiancé had betrayed me, how my parents didn't believe me when I needed them the most. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the complete lack of support from the very people who were supposed to stand by me. The people who were supposed to understand that what Mike did was unforgivable. I made some attempts to get back to normal. I spent long hours at work trying to drown out the thoughts in my head. But it was like I was living in a fog. The sadness, the rage, it didn't go away. I was angry at Mike for doing this, but I was equally angry at my parents for enabling him. And worse, I was angry at myself for not seeing it coming. It had been so obvious that Mike had always been the golden child, but I had never imagined it would go this far. At work, people began to whisper. I didn't think I was being obvious, but I guess the tension was too palpable. I heard through the grapevine that people knew about what had happened, about the affair, about the fight. It was out there and there was no going back. Some people supported me, but others took Mike's side, calling me unstable, questioning my actions. I didn't care. I was so far removed from everything at that point that I couldn't let anyone's opinion hurt me. My parents didn't give up on trying to contact me. My mother would leave messages on my voicemail, crying about how I was breaking their hearts, about how I was tearing the family apart. I would delete them immediately. I couldn't bear hearing her voice. I couldn't bear hearing the same gaslighting that had been happening my entire life. And Mike? Well, Mike was relentless. He sent me text after text saying he was sorry, that I was his brother and he was family. But all I could think was, family? If that's what family meant, I didn't want it. There were even times when I'd get texts from distant relatives. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people I hadn't heard from in years suddenly reaching out, telling me how important it was to forgive, to let go of the past. They said it was just a mistake, that I should move on. But how could I? How could I just let them pretend nothing had happened? The worst part? Sarah. She didn't give up either. She started sending me messages, apologizing over and over again. She said she was sorry for everything, that she never meant to hurt me. But the more she apologized, the angrier I became. Every message, every word felt like a slap in the face. It wasn't just the affair, it was the deceit, the lies, the manipulation. It wasn't just that she betrayed me with my brother, it was that she'd been lying to my face the entire time. That I'd trusted her, I'd loved her, and she had used me. I ignored her messages, but she kept sending them. I couldn't escape it. The emotional toll of everything happening around me was too much to bear. I was angry at everyone, Mike, Sarah, my parents, even myself. I tried to move on, but it felt like no matter what I did, they all kept pulling me back in. I wanted to scream, to shout, to finally make them understand the depth of what they'd done to me. But nothing seemed to help. They had turned my life into a never-ending nightmare, and it didn't look like it was going to end anytime soon. It wasn't until I received a message from Emma, Sarah's younger sister, that I started to feel like maybe I wasn't completely alone in this mess. Emma had always been the black sheep of her family, and we had shared some similar frustrations in the past. After hearing what happened, she reached out to me on social media. She apologized for what Sarah had done and said that she had been disgusted by her behavior. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone understood the depths of my pain. Emma even shared that Sarah and Mike had been living together, acting like nothing had happened. They were going to raise the baby, and Emma said it was sickening. Sarah had apparently been trying to act like a victim, posting on social media about how she and Mike had found love in a twisted situation. Emma said it was hard to watch. At that point, I was still reeling from the magnitude of everything that had happened. It had been weeks and nothing had gotten better. I hadn't healed, I hadn't even started to heal. Every day felt like a struggle, like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. But Emma's support gave me a little hope. It reminded me that, even though my family had turned their backs on me, there were still good people in the world. There were still people who understood. And then the news came, Mike and Sarah were having a baby. And they were going to raise it together. My family was overjoyed, completely forgetting everything that had happened. It was like a slap in the face. I couldn't comprehend how quickly they were able to forgive them, how quickly they were able to forget what they had done to me. My parents, despite everything, were celebrating the pregnancy, talking about how thrilled they were to be grandparents. Meanwhile, I was drowning in betrayal. I couldn't bring myself to care about their happiness. Not after everything they had put me through. I knew it was time for a change. I needed to get away from this toxic situation. I couldn't keep living in this city, surrounded by memories of betrayal and deceit. I needed to move on, start fresh, and take control of my life again. It was becoming impossible to ignore the weight of everything that had happened. I had tried to move forward, but it felt like my past was still chasing me, trapping me in a cycle of bitterness and anger. The hardest part of all this wasn't just the betrayal. It was that my own family had chosen to turn their backs on me, favoring Mike and Sarah and allowing their toxic relationship to bloom in the aftermath of their betrayal. The phone calls kept coming, the messages piling up. My parents didn't stop, and neither did Mike. They kept calling, writing, showing up at my work, at my apartment, everywhere. They had no shame. They tried to tell me that family was everything, and that I should forgive them and move on, but how could I? How could I simply forget everything they had done to me? The betrayal by Sarah, the support they had given Mike despite everything, and the way they pushed me out of their lives without a second thought. I had always been the responsible one, the one who kept things together while Mike got away with everything. And now, after all this, they wanted me to just let go of my anger and act like nothing had happened. It wasn't just their words that hurt, it was their actions. They didn't care about me, not really. They never had. They had always seen me as the second choice, the one who would be there when Mike failed. I wasn't perfect, but I was always the one who tried. I always worked hard, always did what was expected of me, while Mike got away with being the charming golden child, the one who could do no wrong. But this was something else entirely. I had never imagined that he would go this far. Betraying me with Sarah, the woman I had been planning to marry? It was beyond anything I could have ever prepared for. And then came the news about the baby. I knew it would happen, but the reality of it still hit me like a punch in the gut. Mike and Sarah were having a child together, and my parents, despite everything, were ecstatic. It was like they had completely forgotten about the destruction they had caused. They had the audacity to talk about how excited they were to become grandparents, to gush about the baby as if nothing had happened. It was a cruel reminder of how they had never really been on my side. But despite everything, despite how badly they had treated me, I was still human. I still had feelings. I had been devastated by the betrayal, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling of loss. I had wanted a family, and now it was all slipping away. My family, the one I had always hoped would support me, had completely fallen apart. And I was left to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. I knew I needed to get away from it all. I couldn't stay in the same town, surrounded by the constant reminder of my failure to protect myself from the people I trusted most. I had been on a path to healing, but it felt like every time I took a step forward, something from my past would pull me back. The thought of seeing Mike and Sarah, of hearing my parents talk about the baby like it was something to be celebrated, filled me with dread. That's when the idea of moving started to become more than just a fleeting thought. I had always been someone who put down roots, but now I felt like it was time for a fresh start. I had been through so much pain, and I needed to put distance between myself and everything that had happened. Seattle. It seemed like the perfect place. A new city, a new life. The idea of starting over, of leaving the memories of betrayal behind, was a dream I had held onto for weeks. But now it was becoming a reality. I began looking into the logistics of the move. I contacted my manager and explained that I was considering a transfer to Seattle. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was the right one. I needed to get out. I couldn't stay here anymore, and I knew that if I didn't leave, I would be stuck in this emotional prison forever. But even as I began to make plans, things continued to spiral out of control. Mike wasn't done. He had somehow managed to get a hold of my phone number again, and he was calling me non-stop. He tried to explain himself, saying that I should forgive him, that it was a mistake, and that he was sorry. But it wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was everything that came after. His lack of remorse, his arrogance, his entitlement, it was all too much. How could he think that I would just forgive him and let him back into my life? How could I forgive the man who had taken everything from me, including the woman I loved? Then one day I received a message from Sarah. She said she was keeping the baby, and that she hoped I would be a part of the child's life. She asked if I could find it in my heart to forgive them, to be the uncle. I was so angry when I read that message. She had the audacity to ask me for forgiveness after everything she had done, after the lies, the deceit, the affair with my brother. It felt like a slap in the face. I blocked her number immediately. At this point, I knew there was no going back. There was no way I could ever rebuild what I had with my family. My parents, Mike, Sarah, They were all in their own little world, pretending that everything was fine, that everything would go back to normal. But it wasn't normal. It never would be again. And so, I made my decision. I was leaving. I packed my things and began making arrangements for the move. I wasn't looking back. I couldn't. I had to put myself first for once. I had spent my entire life putting others before me, trying to please my family, trying to prove my worth. But I had learned the hard way that sometimes, you have to let go of toxic people. You have to walk away even if it means leaving behind everything you thought you knew. As the day of my move drew nearer, I felt a strange sense of calm. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control. I had made the right decision. I wasn't going to let my family destroy me. I was going to start fresh on my own terms. The days leading up to my move were a blur of activity and emotions. As the final touches were placed on my plans to leave, I couldn't help but feel a strange combination of relief and trepidation. It had been months since everything fell apart with my family, and I was finally walking away. But the weight of the past still lingered, and the thought of leaving everything I knew behind was daunting. I remember the morning of my departure. The sun was barely up, and I had already packed the last of my belongings into the moving truck. The air was cool, and the silence in my apartment felt like a cocoon, shielding me from the chaos of my past. I stood for a moment looking around at the bare walls. This place, which had once been a sanctuary from the world, was now just another chapter of my life that needed to be closed. Seattle was waiting, a fresh start, but it also felt like a place where I could escape the ghosts of my past. I didn't have family here, didn't have the history or the painful memories that had been plaguing me for months. For the first time in a long time, I felt the possibility of freedom. The drive to Seattle was long, and I spent most of it reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about Sarah and Mike and how they had changed everything. The life I thought I was building with Sarah was nothing but a lie. The betrayal from Mike, my brother, the person I had trusted above all else, still cut deep. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and the hurt felt like a permanent scar. But as the miles rolled on, I began to feel a flicker of something else. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was the realization that I was leaving behind a family that had never truly supported me, that had never really seen me for who I was. For so long, I had been trying to fit into their mold, trying to gain their approval, trying to live up to their expectations. And now, as I crossed state lines, I realized I didn't need any of it. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need to be the person they had always told me to be. Arriving in Seattle was surreal. The city was vast, sprawling, and full of opportunity. It was everything I had hoped for and more. I had secured a small but cozy apartment in the heart of the city, far from the memories of my old life. It wasn't much, but it was mine. There were no reminders of betrayal here. No lingering traces of Mike or Sarah. Just a blank slate, a place where I could rebuild. The first few days were difficult. The silence was deafening at times. I had grown so used to the constant noise of my family's expectations, their criticisms, and their judgments. Now, it was just me, and I had to figure out how to live without the weight of their drama hanging over me. I threw myself into work. I was grateful that I had a steady job waiting for me when I arrived. It was a distraction, something to keep my mind from wandering back to the mess I had left behind. But despite my best efforts to focus on the present, the past kept creeping in. The calls from my family never stopped, even from miles away. My mother left voicemails, crying about how I was throwing everything away, about how I was breaking their hearts. My father sent text messages full of passive-aggressive comments, demanding that I come back and make things right. Even Mike tried to reach out, sending me a message asking if we could talk. He claimed he was sorry, that he wanted to fix things. But I knew better. His words were hollow, empty. They meant nothing. I didn't respond to any of them. Not a single call, not a single message. It was difficult at first, but I knew I had to stick to my decision. They had hurt me in ways that couldn't be undone, and I wasn't going to let them worm their way back into my life so easily. The hardest part was still dealing with Sarah. I had tried to put her out of my mind, but the constant updates from her family kept dragging me back into the emotional mess I was trying to escape. She was still keeping everyone informed about her pregnancy, sharing photos of her growing belly and announcing every little milestone. It was maddening. She had moved on just like Mike, as if nothing had ever happened. They had found their happiness, and I was supposed to just accept it and be okay with it. But I wasn't okay with it. I would never be okay with it. It wasn't until I received a call from Emma, Sarah's younger sister, that things started to shift. Emma had been one of the few people who had reached out to me during the aftermath, offering her support and sharing her own frustrations with her sister's actions. She had been disgusted by Sarah's behavior and was determined to make things right. When she called, she told me that Sarah had finally started to feel the weight of what she had done. Emma said that Sarah was breaking down, regretting everything. She told me that Sarah wanted to talk, to apologize for everything, and to ask for forgiveness. At first, I was skeptical. I didn't know if I could believe her. But Emma's sincerity gave me pause. She wasn't trying to manipulate me. She genuinely cared about my well-being. She was trying to help me, even though it was her sister who had caused all this pain. I agreed to meet with her just to hear her out. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for closure. When we met, Emma seemed nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she held a cup of coffee. She told me that Sarah was devastated, that she had never meant for things to go so far. She admitted that Sarah had been caught up in her own insecurities, that she had been manipulated by Mike, and that she regretted the affair. Emma said that Sarah wanted to apologize to me, but she couldn't do it alone. She asked if I would be willing to speak with Sarah, to give her a chance to explain herself. I didn't know what to think. I had spent so much time angry at both of them, trying to come to terms with everything they had taken from me. Could I really forgive Sarah? Could I let her back into my life after everything that had happened? The answer wasn't clear. But for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to move forward. As the days went by, I found myself wrestling with a storm of emotions. The prospect of speaking to Sarah again after everything that had happened seemed impossible at first, but Emma's words lingered in my mind. I wasn't sure if I was ready to forgive, or if I ever would be, but I knew that I needed to find closure. The anger, the hurt, it had been building up for months, and I couldn't continue living like this, stuck in a cycle of bitterness and resentment. Emma kept in touch with me, offering reassurance that Sarah genuinely felt remorse for her actions. I appreciated Emma's honesty and support, but part of me still wasn't convinced that Sarah's apologies were sincere. After all, how could I trust someone who had betrayed me so completely? She had been the one person I trusted more than anyone else, and yet she had broken my heart. How could I just let that go? The thought of forgiving her, of letting her back into my life, was terrifying. But the pain of holding on to the anger was starting to outweigh the fear of facing her. I had been running away from it for too long. The emotional turmoil was eating at me. I knew I had to confront it, even if I didn't have all the answers yet. Finally, after several weeks of back and forth with Emma, I agreed to meet Sarah. It would be on my terms. I told Emma that I would only meet her in a neutral place, somewhere public where I felt safe. No more private meetings where old feelings could cloud my judgment. I was doing this for myself, to try to find peace, not to placate anyone else. When the day arrived, I was a mess of nerves. I had no idea how the meeting would go, or if I would even be able to speak to her without breaking down. I walked into the coffee shop with shaky hands, my heart pounding in my chest. I scanned the room and spotted Sarah sitting at a table by the window, her eyes downcast as she nervously fiddled with a napkin. She looked different, smaller, more vulnerable than I remembered. But there was also a new, unfamiliar sense of calm about her. As I walked up to the table, she stood up quickly, her face filled with a mix of anxiety and hope. She looked at me, searching my face for any sign of recognition, but all I felt was numb. My emotions were so tangled, I wasn't sure what to expect from myself. "Thank you for meeting me," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "I don't know where to begin, but I've wanted to talk to you for so long. I've made so many mistakes. I know I can never take back what I did, but I need you to know that I am truly sorry." Her words hit me like a tidal wave, and for a moment I was back in the past, back to when I had trusted her completely. I remembered the times we had laughed, dreamed, and built a future together. And then it all came crashing down. I wanted to scream, to tell her everything she had done to me, but I held myself in check. I couldn't let this meeting spiral out of control. "Why, Sarah?" I finally asked, my voice hoarse. "Why did you do it? You and Mike, how could you betray me like that? How could you look me in the eye, wear my ring, and pretend everything was fine?" Her eyes welled up with tears and she looked away. I could see the guilt etched on her face. She had no answers that could make this right. "I don't have a good excuse," she said softly. "I was weak and I let Mike get inside my head. He played on my insecurities, made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't worthy of the life we were building. And I made a terrible mistake. I hurt you. I know that. I can't undo what's been done, but I need you to know that I regret it every day." Her words seemed sincere, but the anger still burned in me. How could she expect me to just forgive her? The betrayal wasn't just about the affair, it was about everything else that had led up to it. The years of favoritism, the way she and Mike had always been put on a pedestal while I was left in the shadows. It wasn't just one mistake. It was a lifetime of them. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I said, my voice steady, though my insides were in turmoil. This wasn't just a mistake. It was the culmination of everything that's happened in our family. I trusted you and you broke me. I'm not sure I can ever look at you the same way again. There was a long pause. Sarah didn't say anything for a few moments, just sat there, her shoulders slumped as though she had already given up hope. But then she looked at me and I saw something in her eyes, desperation perhaps, but also understanding. I get it, she whispered. You don't have to forgive me. I can't ask that of you. But I hope one day you can find it in your heart to let go of the anger. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to move on. Her words were like a knife to my chest. I didn't want to let go of the anger. I didn't want to forgive. But I realized in that moment that my refusal to forgive wasn't hurting her anymore. It was only hurting me. I had spent so long nursing my wounds, holding on to the past, that I had forgotten what it felt like to heal. I'll never forget what you did, I said, the words barely escaping my lips. But I'll try. I'll try to let go. We sat there for a few more moments, neither of us speaking. It wasn't a happy ending, but it was a beginning. It was the first step toward healing, even if it was a small one. As I left the coffee shop, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. I wasn't sure what the future held or if Sarah and I would ever have a relationship again, but I knew I had taken the first step. It wasn't about forgiving her. It was about freeing myself from the burden of the past. It's been a few weeks since I had that difficult conversation with Sarah. I've spent much of that time processing what happened and trying to figure out where I go from here. The journey has been long, painful, and full of twists I never could have predicted, but I can finally say that I'm starting to heal. The days following that meeting were tough. I didn't expect to feel better instantly. This wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. I've realized that healing is a slow, ongoing process. But after finally confronting Sarah, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't that I had forgiven her, at least not entirely, but I had taken a step toward reclaiming my own peace. And that, in itself, was freeing. The hardest part has been navigating my relationship with my family. My parents have tried repeatedly to push me back into the fold, but I can't ignore the history between us. The years of favoritism toward Mike, the years of being treated as less than, they have shaped who I am today. I'm not going to pretend that everything can just be erased because they're asking for forgiveness now. The restraining order against Mike is still in place, and though he's tried to reach out a few times, I've kept my distance. The last thing I need is to be sucked back into their toxic dynamic. My lawyer has been a great help in making sure that my boundaries are respected, and I don't feel like I'm just reacting to the whims of my family anymore. I'm doing what's best for me, and that's all I can control. I've also decided to take some space from my family as a whole. I know they'll always be there in one form or another, but I've realized that it's okay to put myself first for once. I don't owe them any more of my emotional energy than I'm willing to give, and right now, I'm giving myself the room to heal. If that means limiting contact, then so be it. I've started focusing more on my own life, on building a future that's about me and no one else. The job situation has been challenging. After everything that went down with my family, work has been the only consistent thing in my life. It's been an escape, a way to keep my mind occupied and productive. I was offered a transfer to Seattle a few weeks ago, and after a lot of soul-searching, I decided to take it. At first, I wasn't sure if moving across the country would really solve anything, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed a fresh start. Seattle represents a clean slate. It's a new chapter, away from the pain and memories of everything that happened here. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that staying here and continuing to fight my family's battles wasn't going to help me heal. The distance will give me the space I need to rebuild my life without the constant weight of my past bearing down on me. As much as I'm looking forward to the move, I've also had to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself. I'm not sure if I want to have children anymore. The thought of fathering a child after everything that's happened, especially with how Sarah and Mike's child has become an emblem of their betrayal, makes me question if it's something I'll ever be ready for. But I'm not rushing to make any major decisions about my future yet. For now, I'm taking things one step at a time. I've started seeing a therapist, which has been incredibly helpful. Talking to someone has allowed me to unpack the emotions I've been holding onto for so long, and I'm beginning to realize that the anger and resentment I've been clinging to aren't serving me anymore. I'm still angry, of course, but I'm learning to let it go. It doesn't mean I've forgiven them, but it does mean I'm no longer letting their actions control my life. One of the biggest lessons I've learned throughout all of this is that family doesn't always mean what we think it does. We grow up believing that family is supposed to have your back no matter what. But sometimes it's not that simple. I spent years trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me, trying to be the son my parents wanted, the brother Mike expected. But the truth is, I never owed them any of that. I had to start living for myself instead of for the approval of others. My relationship with Sarah is still up in the air. I don't know what the future holds, but for now, I'm staying away. I can't be part of her life while she's living in the mess she's made with Mike. The betrayal runs too deep. But I've accepted that this is something I can't control, and it's not my job to fix it. I can't change what happened, but I can change how I react to it. As for Mike, he's out of my life for good. I've already made my peace with that. There's nothing left for me to salvage from that relationship. His actions have shown me who he truly is, and I'm not interested in being part of that anymore. He may be my brother, but at this point, I'm done with the games, the lies, and the manipulation. The hardest part is moving on from the hope that things could have been different. But I know now that I'm better off without them. I'm learning to trust myself again and to put my own needs first. Moving to Seattle is my way of proving to myself that I can move forward, no matter how difficult the journey has been. I still have moments when I feel the weight of the past, when the memories come flooding back and I find myself overwhelmed by everything that's happened. But I remind myself that I'm not defined by my family's actions. I am my own person and I can create a life that's true to who I am. And so, the story continues. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm ready for it. It won't be easy, but I know I can handle whatever comes my way. I'm moving on, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to see what happens next. This is my final update. Thank you all for your support and for being there for me when I needed it most. It's been a long journey, but I'm finally starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. The key lesson from this story is about the importance of setting boundaries and prioritizing self-respect, even when it involves difficult decisions, especially within family dynamics. Family is often considered a source of unconditional love and support, but when those relationships become toxic or destructive, it's essential to recognize that your peace and well-being must come first. This story illustrates the emotional and psychological toll of betrayal and favoritism, highlighting how the protagonist had to separate himself from those who had treated him poorly, despite being related by blood. By moving forward, away from the dysfunction, he was able to reclaim control of his life, heal, and focus on his personal growth. For older adults, this story serves as a reminder that it's never too late to create the life you deserve. Relationships, even familial ones, should be based on mutual respect and understanding, not manipulation or guilt. It's crucial to honor oneself and recognize when it's time to let go of toxic ties, as doing so opens the door to new beginnings, healing, and ultimately a life filled with peace. The journey to healing may be long, but it is possible, and choosing to prioritize self-worth over the expectations and demands of others is one of the most empowering steps one can take. Thank you so much for watching. If you found value in this video, please take a moment to comment 1 down below. We'd love to hear how it resonated with you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on our future content. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with others who might benefit from it too. Your support means the world to us. Also, feel free to share your thoughts and feelings about the video in the comments, whether it inspired you, made you reflect, or just sparked something new. We love hearing from you. Thanks again for being part of our community, and we'll see you in the next one.